actually have to work for it and seek it out. So they
But
weren't worthy of the things that Christ had to offer.
but
So
it
that's
wasn't
why he
wasn't just
hid
the
them.
Pharisees though. It was also the people that were following him. The people like the crowds that had come out to see him. It says he even taught them only in parables.
Well, was it not for them to have to take the next step and seek out the deeper meaning?
So you're saying that Jesus was expecting them to go out and investigate these things themselves?
No, not necessarily by themselves, but to come to Christ, to ask him about the parables.
I see. That's an interesting answer. I'm not sure that's quite right. You know
It's
that.
not quite what he wants. Just to help you out a little bit, Isaiah, you have to think of it very differently. He's not. This is like the common answer that people give, that it has to do with he wants them to put forth the effort. And it has a little bit to do with that, but that's not really the main purpose. Can you think of why the Son of God, who becomes incarnate, comes down to earth and wants to lead men to the Father, the invisible God, would be teaching in parables and such, and wants people to get it from just parables alone?
Oh, because you have to see it with spiritual eyes, right?
Yes, I think that is the gist of it. Yes.
Yes, and I think that is the good explanation. I think that is connecting to what you're saying. I was saying you're a little bit off the mark for a different reason, Isaiah. But yeah, Nolan, I completely agree with Nolan. He does want them to dig, though. He wants them to dig into the meaning, the spiritual meaning, and stop thinking carnally. Stop just thinking about the carnal story. But obviously, you have to look at the meaning. We have to see that God has always taught this way. Jesus didn't just start teaching with parables when he was incarnate, like, oh, so many thousands of years go by and God's never taught with a parable now. He just started doing it. No, he's always been teaching with parables. You read the Proverbs and they talk so much about how wisdom revolves around being able to understand a parable and a dark saying. And it says that in Sirach too. See, God, when he created everything, already planted parables in his creation everywhere, in the sky, in the seasons, in how the plants grow, the cycle of death and rebirth, and in the human family, in the relationships between wife and husband and father and children, and the relationship between a man and his world, him and the animals, him and the plants, him as a farmer. All these analogies God created. So when Jesus was giving his parables, he wasn't creating brand new analogies, but he was really drawing attention to the analogies that had existed for so long and was calling them to contemplate his analogies that he had made a long time ago. And it's true that he made some more in addition. He gave some stories which the people could relate to because they were fairly common. Things like sons being prodigal and leaving their fathers, and these people could relate to these.
And the sheep.
Yes, the shepherd and the sheep, exactly. Some were very specific, like renting out the vineyard to the vine growers, symbolizing the Pharisees, the whole Jewish synagogue that they had abused the responsibility given to them. So he was pointing out things that already existed and saying, don't you understand the meaning of these things? Don't you understand that the church is Christ's bride? Don't you understand that the bridegroom is going to come in the middle of the night? He's going to come suddenly, and you need to be ready. Talking about his own return. And
Yes.
But he did want them to dig. He wanted them to think spiritually, and he did.
You should have him harmonize it now, Luke.
Yes, harmonize it now. You explain it now.
A moment ago, he was trying to crack it a moment ago with how is it that God wills for everyone to be saved, but in this instance, he's not willing to make these things carnal to them.
Yes, and let's read the passage. It says, but when he was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parables, and he said to them, to you it has been given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those who are outside, all things come in parables, so that seeing they may see and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand, lest they should turn and their sins be forgiven them. So my question for you is, I'm testing to see if you understand, why is it that he would teach in parables, but to the disciples he explains the parables? And there are a couple things I want you to answer with, because there is a bit of a nuance to this whole answer.
Okay. So besides the stuff I've already said, like how you said earlier, part of it was to fulfill the prophecy that was written, and another part that I'm thinking has to do with other things with Christ's incarnation and the atonement, like how God could simply just forgive us of our sins, but if He did just forgive us of our sins, we would go back to them. So that's why He had to show us how to live. So in the same way, since God wanted us to think with, um, He wanted us to be spiritual minded and not see these divine things with carnal eyes. We had to try to do that ourselves rather than just having the meaning explained to us. Because if we just had it explained to us, then we wouldn't really understand how to start thinking with a spiritual mindset. Is that part of the answer?
That
At
is
least somewhat.
true. That is true that God wants us to work hard for it. But I have another question for you. Why did he explain it to the apostles? He says to you it's been granted. Why wasn't it granted to all those other people?
See, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe because, well, I mean, the apostles, like, they didn't really resist too much and in following Christ. Like Peter, he was the first to confess that he believed Christ was um the Son of God. They're telling their brothers. Um and maybe because they looked past his carnal appearance, because the Jews, they didn't believe that Christ was the Messiah due to his first appearance, and they thought he was going to come all glorious and everything, because they couldn't distinguish that there were two advents talked about in the scriptures that were prophesied. So maybe because the apostles already had looked past his carnal appearance, like the veil that he had. So that's why they were given like this perk, I guess.
Well, I've read a few commentaries on it, and their explanation is very enlightening. But they point out how Christ called the apostles to follow him, and they did. They gave up everything. Let me remind you of a section in John 6. Do you remember when Jesus taught them about the Eucharist? And he said that you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood to be saved, to have life in yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And let me quote this for you. This is John 6. You can read this here. Therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, "This is a hard saying. Who can understand it?" And by the way, Jesus doesn't explain what he means. Remember? He doesn't even explain to them that he's talking about the Eucharist. He just tells them the spiritual meaning. Or he just tells them the parable and doesn't give the meaning. When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, "Does this cause you to stumble? What then if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life. But there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, "Therefore I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted him by my Father." From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Then Jesus said to the 12, "Do you also want to go away?" But Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of life. Also, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And remember in another passage, when Jesus is talking about the rewards that are laid up for them in heaven, remember Peter says, "Lord, look, we have left everything to follow you." So they had a special gift that Jesus gave them because of the fact that they had given up everything. So they deserved to have these explanations. You remember that the apostles were pretty dull in their understanding. Remember that? They were very
They
similar.
were unlearned.
Yes, they were similar to the crowds, but they did believe in Jesus. They did not doubt him. They didn't just see him as a nothing. At least, Peter, at least, was one of those people that knew that he was the Christ. And on top of that, not only did they doubt Jesus, but the main thing they had going for them was that they gave up everything to follow him. Other people, though, they were kind of following Jesus, not necessarily giving up everything, but just kind of, we're going to spectate and see what's going on here, and then they'd leave. They'd leave, they'd leave, they'd leave. Even some of the people that had been with him for some months or so, they all ended up leaving, but the apostles stayed with Jesus. They stuck it out for a long time because they wanted to understand. And they did dig, and eventually they came to understand these things. Oh, one of the things I wanted to point out to you, Isaiah, is that the scriptures do not say Jesus explained all of the parables, do they? In
No,
fact,
it doesn't.
there are some lengthy sections, like when he talks about the parable of the woman, 3 measures of flour. This is an interesting section here in it's Matthew 13. Let me read this to you real quick here. Jesus gives a bunch of parables, one after the other. Just bam, 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 bunch of parables. He gives the parable of the sower, and this is the part that the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." So he's talking about their dullness, their stubbornness, that makes them undeserving. Jesus says, "And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it." And then right after this, he goes on and explains, or he gives a bunch of parables and does not explain them. Tons of them. He does the parable of the sower. He explains this one. He does the parable of the wheat and tares. He explains that one. But then he does the parable of the mustard seed and the parable of the woman who has the 3 measures of flour and puts a little leaven in it. And he does other parables. He doesn't explain all of them, just a couple. He does the parable of the hidden treasure, which he does not explain, and the parable of the pearl of great price, and the parable of the dragnet. And then what does Jesus say? Jesus said to them, "Have you understood all these things?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." So isn't that interesting? They actually did understand a lot of these parables without any explanation. So don't let anybody tell you, oh, Jesus was just explaining all the parables to them, and they didn't have to do any work. Well, no, they were more spiritually minded. They were becoming more spiritually minded. Yes, Jesus did explain a lot of them, but they had earned it by following him, by not leaving him, and by leaving and forsaking everything to follow him.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just following them though, Luke. I really do think that the key is whenever he says those who are outside, as in because they approach him first and say, "Tell us the meaning of the parables," which tells us that the difference between them and the others is that they're actually aware of the fact that these things are spiritual, but they're very infantile in their understanding. And it's much like we might do with like people who are starting to become spiritually minded, where we will carefully walk them through things because they're aware of the fact that it is spiritual.
Yes, that is
The
definitely
apostles were aware. They were just infantile and they needed to be built up. So he said, "I'm willing to teach you guys because you guys at the very least accept the fact that there is a spiritual reality and you want to learn it."
yes. And there may even be people who are aware of a spiritual reality, but they don't want to learn it. They're just too lazy to. Yeah, that's a very good point, that they did approach him. And that was something Isaiah was pointing out, that they approached him.
And where was that passage again? What chapter were you saying he gave a lot of parables but only explained a few?
This is Matthew 13.
Matthew 13. Okay, I remember that. Where people were trying to say like, oh, they didn't know all of them. No, they said they knew all of them, even though Christ didn't explain them all, because he said
Yes.
it's been given to them to understand. All right. Well, yeah, that was a nice little mini lesson. So thank you, Luke and Nolan. I can't wait to learn more about that and hopefully read some quotes on it eventually. But yeah, I wasn't able to answer that. I got a little stumped. All I could remember is a little bit from like I'd seen that quote Nolan had sent from Bay Day or Bed. How do you say his name?
Bede.
Bede.
I wonder how it's really pronounced. How do you pronounce Bede? Oh, I just say Bede. He is
That's for
Anglo-Saxon.
expounding.
Yeah, if you...
To be fair, though.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, to be fair, it's not something I've studied. If it was something I studied, then and I didn't, and I failed, then that's different. But still, I feel it nonetheless. But I learned. That's the important part.
Yes. But a lot of people, they don't understand. Jesus is testing everybody who follows him. He wants to see that they are sincere. You remember, for instance, when the one guy says, Master, I will follow you wherever you go. And he says, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So he is telling him, you don't know what you're getting into, scribe. You think that this is going to be easy, but I don't live the lavish life of a priest. And likewise, another group that is following him, it says, those who had believed in him, Jesus turned around and said, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine. And another time it says, when large crowds were following him, Jesus turned around, he's like, what is this large crowd doing following me? They have no idea what they're getting into. And he says, if anyone does not hate his father and mother and take up his cross and follow me, he cannot be my disciple. He's kind of like weeding them out, kind of like Gideon. He's like, okay, there's way too many people. You guys are not cut out for this. You understand what my requirements are? So he got them to count the cost. But look at this part in Mark 8. This is another good example of showing you Jesus testing the people and wanting them to prove themselves worthy of the teachings. He will go on these huge walks, just walking out in the wilderness or going on long treks across the countryside. So the people have to follow him. They have to leave things in order to hear these teachings. It says, in those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. So do you see why Jesus performed this miracle? It wasn't just a random miracle. He did it for
Wait,
people.
Give me 1 second. I
Oh.
gotta take a.
He'll come right back.
Well, since you're on Mark, I'm reminded when you were reading that, you already know the story, but when Jesus took the apostles and they said, "Let's go to a deserted place for a while." This is like when the apostles came back from the mission that Christ gave them, and the people, they noticed that Jesus was going to an island, so they like rushed over there. And when Jesus got to the shore and he saw them waiting for him, I think it says that they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them. I think it's in this very chapter as well. But what you said about Jesus and him testing them, obviously that's like how our Lord operates, even with his appearance and these things. So when he sees that they they ran so far, they came so far just to see him, he saw that, okay, maybe they're worthy of this teaching, so let me teach them this, because they
Yes.
did.
Yeah, when he sees their desperation, it's very endearing to him. It makes them worthy. But as I was saying, Isaiah, if you're able to hear,
I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
I was just pointing out that the whole reason Jesus was about to perform this huge miracle for all of them and to teach them was because they had been fasting. They had actually shown themselves worthy by fasting for 3 days. They didn't have anything to eat. They had left their homes just to follow him. They'd run outside, and Jesus is afraid they're just going to collapse if they try to walk home with no food. So he said, I'm gonna do them this favor. And you bring this to any Protestant. I mean, no Protestant catches this. Jesus is making people fast. You know how they say things like, you can't force people to fast. Jesus would never like mandate this or anything, as a regular law or something. But Jesus was saying, hey, if you're going to follow me, I'm going out in the wilderness where there's no food. And they were fasting in order to receive the teaching. They had to fast from the physical food in order to receive the spiritual.
Yes, the bread of life.
This reminds me.
Another good one, Mark 8.
I was just gonna say this reminds me of how I think the fathers say this as well, that seeing Jesus and actually like meeting him in person in that servile form, like it would actually be harder. And obviously because of how he looked, what you guys are saying here and revealing things that I never really considered about like how he was really testing these people, showing that all right, it would have been harder. For example, like you mentioned that he was going on these long walks, before he was like making them fast in these things before he would even teach them, making them work for it. So in a sense, that it would be harder um, to meet Jesus in the sense of the first advent.
Yes. Yeah,
Hey, Luke, and how did you find out these things? I know you read like multiple commentaries on the Gospels, but was there some of the stuff that you had to meditate on for yourself as well, or?
Mostly I'm cheating. I'm reading Chrysostom and reading other commentaries here and there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, right now the only commentary that I'm reading is like one of the best ones, at least that I'm aware. But Jerome's commentary on Matthew. I'm only like a little bit into it, but it's really good so far. And he gives some arguments against like, supposed discrepancies in the Gospels, and he talks about how Eusebius of Caesarea and Julius Africanus cover them more fully in their books to discuss it. And he talks about some things like with Mary, about the marriage with Joseph, how everything like does work out. There's no type of like everything's consistent, and it's really good. But I can't wait to know all the ins and outs of the Gospels. How y'all do?
Well, I hope to know much more of the ins and outs, but we at least know what we know. You just have to make gradual progress in your learning. And don't be ashamed if you don't know everything, because all these things take time.
Yeah, I just have to be diligent in my studies and not try to because it can be tempting to try to teach, but you have to know at least all the basics. But
Yeah.
yes, very edifying. Well, thank you for my quiz, Luke. I'll bother you about another quiz in maybe a week or two.
You can do it sooner than that. I am around, guys. I like it when Nolan comes in because he always has the really great insights. I noticed that even when we read the church fathers, certain things stand out to each of us in different ways and for different reasons. So even when Nolan and I are both reading the same passage, we're learning the same thing, but we tend to put a special emphasis on different things. So it's very good to have multiple brothers together talking about the same thing, because one person is the reason why a passage sticks out to somebody is different from the other person.
Yeah. The fathers do this too.
I see it.
Different things stick out to them depending on who you're reading.
Yeah, originally the whole question that David asked was because we were reading Mark, and I never thought of that, but hey.
Yeah, Bede is a doctor of the church, so the Catholics must listen when he speaks.
There's definitely a reason why a lot of the heresies were born out of some hyper obsession with something that was a little bit true and snowballed into some idiotic caricature of itself.
Mhm.
And like something like that could easily be taken as some sort of like a Gnostic thing from Christ. But that's because, like, in actuality, Christ was a very like a little bit, like get beyond the material things, and we're heading towards the spiritual things. And that's definitely one of those passages where that's really being emphasized. Nowadays, of course, if you have any emphasis on spirituality, allegory, and the fact that the carnal physical reality is an imperfect shadow of something that's invisible, they call you a Platonist or a Gnostic or something like that. But that stuff was there even in the very beginning with Christianity, with Christ himself.
And it's such a damaging thing for them to call us Gnostics, because now the whole world is so confused about what Gnosticism is. Now when the church fathers are destroying the Gnostics, nobody even knows what they're destroying. Because anybody goes and reads them, like, what, were the church fathers Gnostics while they were destroying Gnostics? What even is Gnosticism?
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
damaging that they would call these things. We're showing them doctrines that the whole church taught, and the actual Gnosticism, the enemy, has been forgotten. Guys, what's amazing is these people are Gnostics in so many ways. The Gnostics were the ones who worshipped Simon and his queen, his woman, Helena, who they considered his first perfect creation. And there are a lot of parallels between Helena and Mary, this corrupted version of Mary, and this idea of dying, going straight to heaven. This is a Gnostic idea. They're the ones with the Gnostic doctrines.
They have Gnostic elements for sure, but they're totally different in the way that they're obsessed with the carnal. At the very least, the Gnostics were aware of the fact that, like, they just took it too far, is my point. Like, that was born out of a genuine Christian belief
Yes,
that just became extremely ridiculous, and it was taken to an irrational degree.
exactly. It's like you have the Jew and then you have Gnostic. The Jew is so carnal, and then the Gnostic is overly spiritual, ignoring all the things that are good within this physical reality.
Yes.
And not just ignoring, but condemning, to the point where they would condemn the incarnation.
Would you consider Marcion an Gnostic? Because he would be a good
Of
example.
course. Of course.
Because of how, I guess his doctrine came from Cerdo, but one thing that Marcion contemplated was the verse, a good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and bad tree cannot produce good fruit. So that Marcion was thinking about that, and he, I guess, he came to the conclusion that there must be two different gods. Yeah.
Among other things, yeah. But, like the Cathodox, for example, are like the total opposite of Marcion, whereas like the Christians are like, because Marcion is really born out of the fact that like it is a humiliating thing that the Son of God, the Logos, lowered himself and humiliated himself and became one of us, became a servant, and took on matter. He took on the physical body. He lowered himself by doing that. Marcion, feeling uncomfortable with that, knowing that he really actually did lower himself, um, came up with this whole theory to get away from feeling uncomfortable in that way, and saying that it was just a vision. He didn't actually become a person. He didn't actually assume something that was so inferior and lower. Whereas the Cathodocs are at the exact opposite, like polar point. They're they're all obsessed with like, oh, it's lovely that he became a human, and we love that he took on matter, and he's going to be matter forever. And
it's just so glorious that Jesus took on a body. What a privilege for him. You know that they actually say, guys, Mary, or Jesus owes Mary a debt for having taken flesh from her. They say that. They say he
oh
owes
dear,
Mary the debt, like that was some kind of privilege for him to take on flesh.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But like another example would be like Hermogenes, um, with the matter and such, because with Hermogenes, he again he didn't like the idea that because he I guess he didn't understand how evil could exist and in this world while God created it. So he concluded that well, God didn't all of this that you see, the evil in the world, it wasn't caused by God, which it isn't. So he says, well, there must be another God, which is matter, which is everything that we see. So, or human body, because evil was created from this matter.
It's also so obvious when something is heretical because it takes something to such an extreme. And anybody, even if they haven't read the fathers, they ought to find it very strange that the very fathers who people know were the destroyers of Gnosticism are being accused of having Gnostic ideas. That should make everybody pause and say, wait a second. Are you sure you're not going too extreme in the opposite direction?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I don't. I never understood as to why they consider the fathers Gnostics.
Well, they wouldn't say it. They would just tell us that the ideas we espouse are Gnostic. To say that, oh, it was a humiliating thing for Jesus to come in a human body, they're like, that's Gnostic. The Gnostics are the ones who
Mhm.
say that the body is some filthy thing. But I mean,
Or
Paul
if we
calls it.
say that we won't have genitals after the resurrection.
Oh yeah, saying no, we're not going to have genitals. They're like, that's Gnostic. You don't think we're going to have our bodies exactly like this, with our intestines and the food like gurgling and our bodies burping and farting and
Defecating.
yes,
Yeah.
I want all this in the new body. I must have it all. Like that's how they're imagining it. This stuff is all part of the curse. The bodies have changed. Sorry to be a little crass, but the fathers would do the same thing. Remember,
Yeah.
Peter makes fun of them for worshiping the farting god. So you are allowed to talk about farting to make fun of people when they worship something like that. And they worship the farting body. That's what they want to have for eternity. So that is an appropriate thing to talk about. And that's why we would point out, like, you want a body that's always digesting its food. You want to experience these things for eternity. You don't understand this body is going to physically change and become far more glorious. It will still exist in this physical reality, but it will be clothed with immortality. It will be clothed with God's glory. And the things about it that changed because of the curse are going to be restored back to how it was before Adam and Eve's bodies were cursed. That's not Gnostic.
Yeah, it's a restoration.
Exactly.
Right.
But that's the whole thing. I mean, that's so many things are like that. You can name so many different subjects, and whether it be with the Protestants and the Catholics and everything else, there's either a deficiency or an excessiveness, whereas the Christian is oftentimes in that golden mean.
Yeah, the middle. The balanced middle ground that it understands the truth of both sides, does not go too far. It's always going too far, guys. That's what heresy is. You don't continue on that straight line, but you fall off into some crazy extreme view. It's so sad that they think we're in the extreme, but we can point to something far more extreme. It would be Gnosticism. And we can point to something far more extreme than where we are on the opposite side of Gnosticism, which is worshiping matter, saying that matter has become divine even before the resurrection. I mean, if matter's already divine, what's going to happen at the resurrection? It's going to be like ultra divine, I guess. Clearly, they've gone too far by saying matter is divine before the resurrection.
Luke, um, Novations. I'm not sure if any other church fathers talk about that, but I'm pretty sure Novation in his no, I'm not sure. I know, but in his book on the Trinity, he talks about this exact thing. that orthodoxy is in the middle. It's not on the extreme ends, and that heresy is when people go to the extreme end.
Yeah, we should save that. Good idea. I'm glad you
I
you
have
remember
it.
that.
I can send it if you'd like.
Yes, let's do it. Let's save it. I know just the place I would put
Send it
it
right now.
in my script.
I'll send it right now. Give me a moment.
Yeah, send it to me privately, will you? You can also post it here. I'll just save it for later. I'll grab it later. I'm getting the bead quote on face veiling. Oh dear.
Kevon said if you wanted to have that call, he asked you about a few days ago.
What call? What call? I don't remember, guys. Too many messages. I'm sorry. Remind me. Privately message me, Kevon. But it might be a little too late to have any big serious call. But maybe not, if it's a short thing. Ah, the symbolism of the body. Good gravy, Kevon. At 10:30 at night, you want to talk about all that? But that does sound like a great topic. We will have a great call on that. Why don't you let me go over my document that I have?
Yeah.
I've got a great
You're
big,
gonna do it now?
definitely not now, but I've got a big document on nature symbolism, and also there's this great section in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, which they say nobody knows for sure if that book is pre Christ or if it was written afterward. It's got stuff that is so clearly messianic. I mean, it's obvious. I'd be shocked if that was written before Christ. I truly would be. But anyway, in that book, it's got some great stuff on symbolism of the body and of the organs in the body, which is something I'd really like to understand. But I've put off reading those sections because I'm busy with other things. But every organ in the body symbolizes some faculty of the soul, some ability in it to perceive or feel something.
Oh, you know, soul is a very interesting topic. I'm currently reading Tatian, addressed to the Greeks, and he's saying things that are very similar to Tertullian about the soul. I'm not sure what to make of it. I was going to collect them in a document and ask you about it.
Well, you can, but probably just not tonight.
Yeah, and definitely not tonight. Um,
Luke, I did send it in the church father section, but I will
Cool. Oh,
also forward it to you.
yes, thank you. That's great. That's such a great quote. And
by
Brousseau
the way,
points
Lou,
that out. Yeah.
do you want to see if Nolan had any thoughts on the haggling thing, or if he researched it at all?
We have discussed this topic at great length. This is
Okay.
something that we have talked about with Christian. Christian brought it to our attention that we Christians ought not to be greedy and haggle over things. When somebody set a price for something, we ought not to say, oh, but look, it's got problems with it. Come on, bring the price down. Come on. Or be stingy like that with our money, but that we should accept the price of something, buy it at the price. However, there is an appropriate time to discuss the price of something. You understand, sometimes the worth of a product is not really set in stone. In fact, this happens more frequently than you might think. It's one thing to walk into a store and to see price tags on things and to go and haggle about things. It's another for somebody to have something and to even say to you, hey, make your best offer. And you make your offer and you let them know how much money you have and how much you're actually able to pay on it. That's not necessarily haggling at all. So there is some nuance, and we should be using discernment to make sure that we're not being greedy and stingy. But it is not a sin to discuss the price of something at all. It's just God looks at the heart, and I think there are certain times when your actions are clearly betraying some kind of greediness or stinginess in you.
Perfect answer.
Yeah.
For instance, with houses, when people are selling houses, they want you to look over the house and they invite you to have an inspection done and to have somebody do an assessment of the property. And with houses, it's very common for prices to fluctuate, to go up and down, back and forth. Like if a house sits on the market for a long time, for over 30 days or 60 days, the price tends to continually go down because they are looking for a buyer, and they're known to be flexible on the price. And they also will bring down the price if you have an inspector look over the house and find a problem with it. You can either request that they fix the things in the house, which of course they would be doing, they'd be footing the bill for that, or you can simply ask, if you're going to cover the repairs yourself, you can just ask, could you lower the price a little bit since I'm going to be doing the repairs? I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Once again, we have encountered the golden mean. Don't be too stingy, and don't be on the other side either. It's like you can just be like, I don't know how anybody could ever convince me to just simply say, like, not haggling over it or trying to take advantage of somebody, but just simply saying, hey, this is the money I've got. This is what I'm willing to pay for it. Would you accept that offer? You're not interested? All right, see you later. Have a nice day. That's sin. I think that anybody that says that is probably trying to take advantage of buyers, to tell you the truth, Luke.
Yeah, you may be right about that. Well, there's this great verse in Proverbs where it says, a person says, bad, bad. It says, bad, bad, says the buyer, or, oh, it's lame, it has problems. But then when he goes away, he boasts about the thing he bought. So it's saying there's some situations where somebody will pretend to be critical about the thing they're buying, and they'll point out all the flaws, and they'll say, come on, bring that price down, it's lame. And then after they actually get it at the low price, they go home and they brag to everybody, guys, I got the greatest deal today, I got the best thing. See, that guy really is deceptive, and he is greedy. To pretend to think that something is worth less and to get somebody, try to convince somebody to sell it for less when he knows it's worth more, that's deceptive. And, even if no haggling went on at all, guys, we should be conscientious about these things. We should not be trying to exploit people. Haggling isn't the only way to exploit people. But you ought to be just an honest buyer. On the other hand,
even that though, Luke, it's like there is such a thing as like discounts,
right,
and like if both parties agree, even if I'm saying like, hey, I know that this thing that you're offering is worth more, but this is genuinely all that I have, would you be willing to accept
Yes,
that?
yes.
And if the person says, yeah, that's fine, I'll take that, you cannot convince me that either one of them are guilty of sin or anything like that. I think that's ridiculous.
Yes, there's a really fascinating example of this. I'll use as an example here. Let me share screens here. This is a really interesting parable from our Lord. And it can sound kind of like taking advantage of somebody. Look at this. This is the parable of the field. Jesus says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. You guys understand what he's saying? He's saying a guy, some random guy, finds treasure in a field. Now, guys, does he own that treasure? No, it does not belong to him. It just says he found it. So either he's walking along, or I imagine like a servant, like a slave who is plowing his master's field, and like his plow, runs into something like some kind of treasure or something, or I don't know exactly how it happens, but he goes, oh my goodness, there's something really valuable here. And he goes and he sells everything he owns so that he can buy this seemingly worthless field. And nobody knows why he sold, why he's buying this field, but like, all right, fine, you can have the field. And so he buys something from somebody else. There's a very valuable thing on this person's property that they didn't know about, and it's now his. So that could seem like taking advantage of somebody, but Jesus uses this as a parable for what it's like in this life when we find the gospel, we find the kingdom hidden here, we stumble across it, and we say, oh, I'm going to do everything in my power to get this. This must be mine. I'll sell everything. I'll give up my entire life to have this hidden treasure. I've always found that an interesting parable.
Well, it's definitely, don't you think it's like a lot like, Isaac being taken, old blind Isaac being like taken advantage of, like he realizes like, this is a much better, we're taking it from the Jews. I mean, that's really what it is, right, Luke? I mean,
We have taken it. Yep. They didn't
we've taken it.
understand how valuable this was that they had. It's also, it applies to that. Absolutely. And it also just applies to us as
I thought though, Luke, that you were going to go with a different parable, to tell you the truth. I thought you were going to, at first, I thought you were going to do the one with the laborers and the disputation over like the value of what they were being paid.
Well, if you think it's a good example, you could give your take on that.
Well, just because, they're like the amount of work that I did is set at a higher value than what you're paying me compared to these people. They didn't work as much, so the value is lesser. And then his response is, this is the price that we agreed on when we started, man. Get out of here.
We just want to make sure that we are being honest. That is the most important thing, is honesty, and don't be a lover of money. Sometimes it will come down to God looking in your heart. God knows it. Sometimes God gives commands like do not covet that you can't really perceive in another person. Only God knows about it. Lusting and coveting and having anger or hateful thoughts. But you should introspect and examine yourself and see how much you really care about money. And if you really are somebody who you're not just being frugal, but you are, you're going beyond frugality and you're actually exploiting other people to make money.
Yeah.
What about exploiting other people to save money? Like, for example, say for example, a kid, he lives in his mother's house. Well, I guess he wouldn't be a kid anymore. He'd be an adult. So, an adult, just started working, and I suppose he saves much of his money, and still relies on his parents, because he wants to save. What do you think?
Well, if his parents let him do it, then it's allowed. I think a good parent, a loving parent, would want their child to save money, while living with them. In fact, parents used to give an inheritance to their children, but that's far less common now. The loving parent wants to give their child a good start in life, their son, I mean. And they say, yeah, live with me and save up money, and then, you can buy a house or do whatever you need to do.
Right.
Yeah, there's no disrespect from us toward any son who lives with their parent and saves up money and avoids destroying themselves by becoming isolated, living all by themselves out in the world. That's very dangerous. It's wise for them to stay with their parents, unless their parents are very corrupting themselves. Then obviously they should leave. All right, Brian, I found a quote from Bede. You want me to read it to you? Hey, Adriano's here. Good to see Adriano. You missed it, Adriano. See, you get here and you think, oh, Luke's talking about veiling. That's all he ever talks about. We were having a good conversation about something other than veiling a second ago. You just got here at the time that Brian asked me to go over a veiling quote I found from Bede. Okay, look, Brian. Look, are you here, Brian? Here, check this out.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm
look.
here. I'm just gonna connect to a hotspot real quick so I can get
Okay, take your time. No problem.
better
Take your time.
connection. One moment.
It's a short little quote. Very short.
All right, I can see.
Okay, so he's talking about veils. He's talking about Luke 9. So I'll just read the red sections. He says, consequently, even the Jews saw Moses, but they did not merit to follow him as he ascended to God on the mountain. They see him also when he returned, but not without a veil. And he talks about how, we have the eyes of the mind unveiled. So he says, here Moses, coming forth from the secret presence of God, veiled his shining face before the people, because surely he did not reveal the secrets of innermost clarity to the crowds. So obviously, face veil is the context here. And he says, the clayey ground that for a time covered these hidden things in the plain is dissolved. That is, with the approaching proclamation of the Lord's passion, through which the long hidden sacraments of the church would be uncovered from the veil of the letter, the shadow which concealed the heavenly secrets begins to wane and be destroyed. So obviously the whole context here is veiling things, making things be hidden and secret. He says, thus it remained, it is not interpreted, so that it might have the honor of a secret veil. Not that it is denied, but lest it should be cheapened if exposed. So he's talking about exposing things, veiling things. He says, but this veil remains over the Jews' hearts to this day, not revealed to them, but taken away from us who believe in Christ. For not in vain at his death was the temple veil torn in two. By the way, I'll point out that the temple veil, similar to Moses' veil, is a curtain. It's not something just on the top or the back of something. It's in the front that blocks passage, blocks your sight. Okay, just a couple more here, and he's about to talk about face veil. He's about to connect it with a woman's veil. He says, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. This happened as the Lord expired, as Matthew and Mark attest. But Luke relates it in advance. For wishing to add miracle to miracle, when he had said the sun was darkened, he immediately considered it appropriate to add, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. The veil of the temple is torn so that the secrets of the covenant and all the sacraments of the law, which were previously covered, may appear and be accessible to the nations. Again, talking about things being secret, being invisible, but now appearing visible. He talks about, with the veil of heavenly mysteries torn open, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we are. We're at the final part now. He says, but the rolling away of the stone mystically signifies the revelation of the sacraments which were hidden under the veil of the letter. For the law is written on stone. When its covering is removed, the dead body of the Lord is not found, but is proclaimed as living. Just as it is written that when the Savior's body was placed in the tomb, angels stood by, so it is also believed that during the consecration of the most sacred mysteries of his body, angels are present. with the apostle urging women to wear a veil in the church because of the angels. So all the context here is Moses' veil, and then the veil of the temple, and then women wearing a veil. I don't see how he could jump from saying a veil that covers the face, a veil that covers the front of the temple, makes everything inside of it hidden, and then saying, but I want women to wear something on the back of their head, or maybe just on the top, when the context is a curtain that covers it from the front. I just think he ties it all together. What do you think? Is this good enough?
I guess so, but I mean,
I suppose.
It's all right.
yeah.
It's all right. It's all right. We'll find better ones over
Yeah.
time. We're gonna give
I
him
think it's
time.
really good, Luke. Brian is all. He's hard to please, it
He's
seems,
tired.
but
It's 3 a.m. I'd be hard to please at 3 a.m. too.
What are you talking about, Nolan? Hard to please, dude. What are you talking about?
Brian, give it like a year. You'll come back around. You'll reread that quote with a fresh set of eyes. You'll be like, "That's really good, Luke. We need to use this one more often." That's how it always happens. Okay.
I mean, I didn't say it was bad by any means. I think it.
It's a
I
great
think it is.
quote.
I think it. No, I think it's fine. I think it's great. It's just. I thought maybe Luke was gonna give something that's like probably like
I've given
straight
enough.
up.
Oh,
But even though it's not,
that
the
last
context,
quote.
I guess, does. I guess the context does um point to that being an actual like complete veil. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the burden of proof is for them to prove that there's like some brand new, completely different kind of veil. These weirdos.
That's just to show that at that time in history, in these people's minds, all three of those subjects were interconnected.
Yes. See, they refuse to believe that Moses' veil has anything to do with a woman's veil. Do you see? You do know they say that, Brian, that, oh, Moses' veil is completely different. But for them, they're saying, no, all these things are connected. It's the same thing.
I see.
I guess I wondered as if because it's the same word being used there for Moses' veil and the veil that I think it was Paul who mentions it, right?
Well, it's actually two different words. Paul says that a woman should be, well, there's a word in the Greek that's kalypto. And Paul doesn't just say kalypto, he says katakalypto, which means totally veiled, totally covered from top to bottom. Now, that's a verb that he uses, katakalypto. He doesn't say how they should be covered, how they should be veiled exactly, how they should be hidden. He just says they need to be hidden. So a verb, obviously, like if I tell you, hey, let's play hide and seek, and we're gonna go play hide and seek. I can hide myself in lots of different ways. I could hide behind a tree, or I can hide behind a car, or I could hide under a blanket. So I'm being hidden, but I'm not. The word hidden doesn't designate any specific kind of covering. Whereas the word kaluma, that's what Moses was wearing over his face, that is a specific veil. That just means a fabric veil, a cloth veil. It's a noun.
Uh, I suppose that would make sense because wouldn't in that section there in First Corinthians he's just saying that women should be hidden and it could be like with even with the hair, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got it. He doesn't care how she's veiled. She just needs to be veiled. I'm not even doing anything. Whoever decided to watch.
Yeah. Do you like that one that I sent you earlier today, Luke, about the incense?
From whomst?
You didn't think it was that good, did you?
From whomst? Who was it?
Ephraim?
Let me click it and see it. Let me make sure. Let me see. Ephraim. On incense.
Yeah. Do you like it? You're kind of hard to please.
Let's see
You have
here.
a lot in common with Brian.
Oh, that is a great one. Yeah, this is a good one. This is excellent. Yeah. I'm going to save this. I forgot to save this earlier.
He said they would rather be stoned than have incense offered to them.
If they wouldn't let incense be offered to their living bodies, how much less to their dead? But they don't believe that. They believe, no. Since their bodies are deified, you can offer pictures to their non-deified bodies.
It just wasn't time yet.
But after they die, yes, now you can offer incense to pictures of their non-deified bodies. It all makes perfect sense when you think about it.
But if God made like the matter divine in the incarnation, wouldn't their bodies already be the matter of their bodies already be made divine, and you could worship the living apostles?
This is true. That technically their bodies are divine at that point. They lose.
It's specifically Luke. You have to say which rhythm. He has multiple sets of rhythms. It's 80 rhythms upon the faith against the disputers. Rhythm 61.4.
80 rhythms.
So it's
what?
rhythm 61 out of those 80.
80 rhythms what?
Yes.
80 rhythms of what?
Yes.
Oh.
80 rhythms. Let me get it for you again. It's in this. I don't know why you didn't copy it. It's in the message that I sent.
Oh.
80 rhythms upon the faith against the disputers.
Got it. Cool.
Perfect.
Nice. I do have this one from Ephraim. This is good. This is an overarching theme, which sometimes is even better than a specific quote. He says, during those same days, God gave Moses commandments concerning the building of the tabernacle, of what it should be made, and how, and the vessels they should make for the sanctuary, and the commandments concerning the holy oil, the incense, and the priestly sacrifice. By saying to him, you shall make everything according to the model of the tabernacle that I will show you, he first called it a model and a temporal tabernacle to indicate that it was transitory and that it should be replaced by the church, the perfect prototype which lasts forever, and so that they would esteem it because of its likeness to the heavenly tabernacle.
Pretty good. That is a good one.
But I mean, you got so many in here that are absolutely killer. I love how after all these quotes, you just get to Jerome, and Jerome hardly has anything to contribute. He just is in a bad mood as usual. He just is here's Jerome on incense. Then again, no one but a profligate denies that the profligate and licentious find a delight in sweet odors, different sorts of incense, fragrant balsam, kufi, onanthe, and musk, which is nothing but the skin of a foreign rat. I mean, that's all he has to say. Like, everybody else, they want to be all eloquent and everything. And a
I love
profligate
it.
is a recklessly extravagant or wasteful person. Wasteful in the use of resources. He is the Tertullian of the post-Nicene church.
Yes, yes, he is.
I was actually thinking that. Or something similar.
Yeah, I can't help but think of Tertullian when I read him. Yeah. Okay, now what was I even working on? Oh yeah, I was trying to satisfy Brian with finding a good quote on veiling from Bede. Let's see here.
Would you be able to post some other quotes on what we were discussing earlier? Would Jesus like speaking in parables, like why he did that, like that section in part? I just wanted to do more reading on that.
Sure. Let me see here. Did we post John 6? I mean, these are a few good ones. Matthew 13. Just read all of Matthew 13. I'm going to say, Kevon, read all of Matthew 13.
And use those websites, Kavan. You know, there's that website that we put in the faith resources just earlier. Raheem put it in at 9:11. And you know, that those specific verses that you have in mind, go through and look at all of the selections of the fathers talking about it. There's also that ancient Christian commentary set and all of the other resources. So if you're wanting more of the fathers talking on that specific section of Mark, go use all those resources.
Okay.
Luke, earlier today I asked you, or I didn't really ask, but I said that there's that one quote about images. I wasn't sure if it was of any value. I saw that you gave a thumbs up to it. Does that mean that you think it was a useful one, or like
Yeah,
was
you had one
okay?
from Origin and then somebody else, and I added
No,
both of
not
them.
Origin. Caesarius. For that one. Remember, if you go to quotes and like you scroll up a bit,
Okay.
when I say a bit, it probably means like 5 miles. But
Yeah, exactly.
right there, yeah,
Here we
that
go.
one. You gave it a thumbs up. I'm not sure if that was good or not.
Yeah, this is good.
I feel like the ending part maybe is. I mean, at least from when I see it, I think the ending part probably is better than the other parts when he talks about uh, that they saw dire punishment afflicted, and then he talks about um, creatures in whom they thought the divine image was in, or divine nature was in.
Mm-hmm. And he's using a word that almost certainly means creation, but they sometimes translate it as creatures. But yeah, it would apply to dead images as well.
Do you think I should? Do you think I should go on Patrology Latina real quick and pull up the that sermon, and then try to translate that portion?
You can. It's good enough as it is.
Oh, all right. I'll just leave it then.
No, it's a good quote. I'll save it. I just know once you get to the 600s, and he's in 500s. Once you get to the 600s, you are going to find people who who actually do think you should bow down to images. So I would prefer to have read more from Caesarius before I can say for sure that he is against bowing down to images. I'm pretty sure he is. He's 500s. I have not encountered anybody, any church father in the 500s who endorses bowing down to images.
Also, he read the Fathers and he read Augustine too, and Augustine was against it. So I don't see why Caesarius would somehow be like, "No, Augustine was wrong. Let's bow down to these images."
Well, reading somebody doesn't necessarily mean you agree with him. I know Augustine read Cyprian, and yet he would say Cyprian is stupid on a lot of issues.
Oh yeah, but I'm pretty sure that Augustine did influence a lot of Caesarius's writings, from what I was looking at online. And he builds. I think some of his sermons are built off of Augustine's sermons too. So
You guys have given me so many quotes lately that are going to take some time to organize.
Luke, Stephen, or Stephen had
Mhm.
a question about Augustine. He asked if you believe he's a heretic.
Absolutely. If he condemns something that the church universally taught before him, that's heresy. He condemns the
what
idea
does he
that
condemn?
multiple issues. He believes all infants are guilty of sin and are automatically condemned and damned if they die without baptism. That's something the church would have completely condemned him on. Now, we don't condemn him for every single doctrine he taught, but usually nobody teaches only heresy. They teach heresy on specific points. If only he himself was not so harsh against the doctrines of the fathers and harsh against babies of all people. I don't want to go out being a person who condemned to hell the most innocent and favored group of beings that will ever exist. Babies. But he said they are all damned. And I think that the same measure that he judges other people will be measured back to him. I think he is in a lot of trouble for having done that, for having taught something that the Catholics taught for centuries and centuries afterward throughout the Middle Ages and until recently. The idea that all babies, even babies who die in abortions, babies who are murdered, they all go to hell. Or he taught limbo, which might as well be hell. He just said eternal conscious torment, not necessarily with fire. He said they don't deserve fire necessarily, but they will be miserable for eternity.
That's just a wicked doctrine, man. Like, when you think about it, babies.
Yeah, and that's your response, by the way. Always respond that way. If anybody says, "How dare you insult blessed Augustine," don't condemn him harshly. Say, "How can anybody condemn harshly a man who condemns harshly all innocent infants? How can I be harsh against a person like that?" I can't. I mean, I could say the worst things about that kind of person and I wouldn't be being harsh. He already is harsh. He dishes it out. If he dishes it out, he needs to learn how to take it. I'm sure he regrets it by now. I'm sure he has been told by a few people by now how wicked that doctrine is. And how many people he led astray. Of course, I would pray for him to be forgiven and be saved, but you can pray that about the worst heretics, even worse than Augustine, and it doesn't mean they will be saved. So I'll pray for my own soul most of all. I hope that I'll be saved. But I sure wouldn't want that on my rap sheet, the list of sins I've committed, that I taught a heresy like that.
I think what's even more ridiculous is just the fact that when you consider that Augustine, like Stephen was saying, that like he's pretty much a Calvinist at the end of his life. Like the things that he taught, Calvinists will point to Augustine as the church father. They'll call him, that taught their beliefs on a load of subjects, especially denial of free will, probably. Total depravity and their views of original sin. Like Calvinists will point to Augustine. So near the end of his life, he was a massive heretic. But then, uh, so yeah, he bred this heresy, right? And then 1,000 years later, it becomes like like this nasty burger. Like it reminds me of what's his name, Hermes's video. I forgot what video it is, but I think it's the video about not reading, like being careful about reading scripture, where like he shows a picture of this nasty burger just full of like bugs and stuff, just disgusting burger. And I think of that when I think about, probably even worse when it comes to Augustine, because anyways, let me get to the point. My point is simply that Augustine started, or he planted the roots of these heresies, and then the Calvinist comes along, and John Calvin comes along, who studied Augustine. You have Luther, who comes along, Martin Luther, who also studied Augustine, and both of these guys used Augustine to promote their heresies. So somehow Augustine isn't a heretic when he was a heretic for half his so-called Christianity, but then somehow you have a guy like Origen who speculates on certain issues and says certain things that some people don't like, that aren't even terrible. Like they shouldn't even mean anything too much or be condemned. But like they'll condemn Origen, but then the Catholics won't condemn Augustine when he literally taught heresies for like half his so-called Christianity, like 20 years, and then through his teachings you have other heretics who come along and build off of that. It's crazy the way that some people um think in regards to this.
Yes, it reminds me of the scripture here in 1 Timothy 5, where Paul says, "The sins of some men are clearly evident, preceding them to judgment, but those of some men follow later. Likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden." So he's saying some people, they're so wicked, it's just obvious. You see it. You say, "Oh, I know he's going to be judged for that on Judgment Day because it's just sitting right there." But some people, you don't know how harshly they're going to be condemned until you see how their sins affected other people over many generations. How, for instance, raising a really bad son and not teaching him properly resulted in many evil generations afterward, which will come back to bite him. All of us are leaving behind a huge legacy, guys. You have to remember that everything you do has huge ripple effects, lasting consequences that could potentially go for 100 years or whenever Jesus returns. And that goes for good works you do too. We were just talking about this yesterday, but Augustine is a good example of this, that, he and others may say, I only did a slight deviation, I only did a little bit of bad, but he doesn't realize how much evil he has caused with his bad teaching. He will answer for it. And he cannot completely disown people who use him to justify what they did, if what he taught really is what, if what these heretics are teaching really is what he taught.
Well, I'm reminded of Marcion, what happened to him. He died before he could even finish his penance. Um, Tertullian says, well, Tertullian says he receives a permanent excommunication. But what happened with Augustine and his son? He abandoned him. Oh,
I'm not talking about him in particular with his son. I'm talking in general about us with our sons. If we do a bad job raising our children could grow up to be very wicked. A lot of sons grow up just to be average people that don't do much with their lives. They're pretty lazy and they're like their fathers and they just commit all the sins that are common to man. But some of us, through our neglect or bad teaching, may raise a real monster that does extremely evil things in life. So on Judgment Day, things will come back to us, things that went down many generations, possibly. And it goes for good things too, where your one little act of kindness had this ripple effect that affected so many people, and you never would have expected it, but you end up gaining interest on that little investment you made with some good works. You get paid back with interest on Judgment Day. And there's being paid back interest, and then there's owing interest, and interest accumulating. That accumulates to you doing a small bad thing that has branches out to affect many other evil things, and before you know it, your debt has become massive on Judgment Day because of how many people it affected.
That's very. I was very scared to think about. I guess we don't. Well, I guess I haven't really thought about as to how my actions can cause these ripple effects. Um, but yeah, it does make sense, especially with the neglectance of the children.
Yes,
Um,
maybe that's the most common one. Well, think about the apostles, that they are still collecting, they're still receiving the, rewards for good things that they did 2,000 years ago. And so are the other patriarchs and saints. And the church fathers are collecting interest on the good teachings that they left behind for us.
yeah,
It's probably a bit too niche, and it more than likely isn't something that we'll know until the end. But as we're having this discussion, thought came to my mind of like a heretic, or well, and no, for simplicity's sake, we'll say like a heretic who hmm, what would be good?
A heretic who repents, and now he still has evil things to make up for.
Yeah, like for like I don't know. Let's say like Chris. Like Chris, uh let's say his doctrine gets like much more popular for whatever reason. Like it becomes like a whole big denomination. And then a little bit later in his life, he repents completely, gets properly baptized, the whole shebang. But
Well, you're skipping one thing.
oh,
What you're skipping is the period of time before his baptism. You're saying, well, what if he got baptized? Would he have to make up for all the bad things he did? But the church wouldn't allow him to be baptized until he had made up for what he'd done.
hmm,
And if he goes and gets baptized anyway, I mean, what will be required of him will still be very great. Just like with Paul. Paul was baptized. He had his sins forgiven him, but God laid a tremendous burden on his shoulders and said, this is the work I want you to do. And that work entailed suffering constantly. Suffering physical persecution, being beaten and whipped and stoned, and being shipwrecked and having sickness, and being hated on all sides and betrayed by his own countrymen. And
hmm.
if Paul had ever stopped doing that, if he had ever said, well, you know what, I've been baptized, I'm not going to preach the gospel, I'm saved, Paul would have been damned. He even says that. He says, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. So he knew he owed that for what he had done, and Chris would be in the same situation. So would any heretic. Even if they went and got baptized, they would have to strive, they would have to work more than other people because of all the evil that they had done. It's not to say that they haven't been forgiven of their sins, because obviously if Paul had died at any time during his ministry, he would have been saved. God wouldn't have said, hey, you haven't done enough to make up for all the evil you did. Well, I mean, if he dies, he dies. He was working when he died, so he's not a disobedient rebel at the time of his death. The problem is if you should cease to work, then you're in big trouble.
Well, I was also thinking about like afterwards, because we're talking about like how our decisions can have like ripple effects. So like let's say in the hypothetical, Chris does penance throughout his life trying to like undo his wrongs and dies eventually. But even still, this sect has continued to grow and morph even after his death. I'm just thinking, I'm like, is he still going to answer for that and all of the people who come years afterward?
God knows, but maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that's why I prefaced it with like, I don't know if this is something that we would actually even know the. It's a very specific circumstance.
I think it's something scary as well, about the day of judgment, because there's a lot of women who have had an abortion. I think about how it will be to see your innocent baby that you've killed, because there are degrees like in sin, even within murder, right? I would say someone who kills like unintentionally, right, that person is like the bottom of the list, and someone who kills, um, and then they regret it, and then like a murderer who just like murders for the heck of it, and then someone who kills a family member, and at the top of that list is, well, I guess before that, a child who kills their parent, and on the top would be, in my opinion, a mother who kills or a father who kills their child. That would be scary.
Are there? Cause I know there's. Oh dang! You know now I'm forgetting what the book is called. Raheem, do you remember what that book that we read in the lounge a while back?
Apocalypse of
Ante
Peter. Apocalypse of
Apocalypse,
Peter.
Apocalypse of Peter. Is that what it was? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Because I'm just thinking, I'm like, are there any other writings that detail like what the punishments in the afterlife will be for certain sins? Because like, I mean, before I even read that book, my understanding was just like, yep, everybody's burning in fire, and that is still true. But assuming that book is true, now I also know that there's still lots of nuance, which makes sense because there are degrees of sin, so there would be degrees of punishment. Do we? Is there any that we know of that goes into detail, or no? Have we lost Mr. Putman?
There's very little.
Hmm.
There's a very early book called The Acts of Thomas. Not the Gospel of Thomas, that's a Gnostic trash heap, which of course incorporates some true sayings of Jesus. We know that, but obviously there's a lot of garbage in there, so nobody should ever read that book. But then there's a book called Acts of Thomas, which has a great quote about veiling. Let me read it to you.
That's not ask this question.
But anyway, in this book, it talks about, going around, and in it this is very early, guys. They say this is written like in the 100s. You can look it up. It's really early. But obviously not truly written by Thomas. I don't think anybody thinks that. Could I get a Wikipedia? What was that sound? Was that you guys? Not Gospel of Thomas. Wow, they didn't even have a Wikipedia page for it. Can you believe that?
Interesting.
Here's a wiki source. Here, what date did they stick on this? Okay, they're saying this is 200s. Early 200s, so that's interesting. I thought it was late 100s, but it is early 200s. Still very early, and yeah, it's interesting, but it's got a lot of that kind of thing. The apocryphal. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say apocryphal. I mean Dante's Inferno type thing, where you see a bunch of people suffering in different states. Thomas gets a vision and gets to see all the people suffering in hell. It says, "And he took me unto another pit, and I stooped and looked, and saw mire and worms welling up, and souls wallowing there. And a great gnashing of teeth was heard thence from them. And that man said unto me, These are the souls of women which forsook their husbands, and committed adultery with others, and are brought into this torment. Another pit he showed me, which I looked into, and saw souls hanging, some by the tongue, some by the hair, some by the hands, and some head downward by the feet, and tormented with smoke and brimstone, concerning whom that man that was with me answered me, The souls which are hanged by the tongue are slanderers, that uttered lying and shameful words, and were not ashamed. And they that are hanged by the hair are shameless ones, which went about in the world with heads uncovered." So there's a lot more to it, but it just talks about people being punished according to the sins they committed in this life. So that may be true, but we don't know, guys.
Gosh,
And
these books are.
this book endorsed by the early church, or their writing.
It's quoted by Origen once. That's the only reference I know about it.
Okay.
It's quoted in his other commentary on Genesis, which we no longer have.
Well, maybe I'll still read it, but take it with a grain of salt.
Gosh, those books are very convicting and scary as well.
That is the benefit of them. It puts you in the right state of mind and gives you the fear of God.
It's a terrifying thought. Like the last, I think it was the last one you said, where it was like all the women are hanging by their hair, and I just think of like billions of women hanging, like
The tongue one especially. Yeah.
It makes me think of like how in butcher shops they have like the animals hanging on those racks. It makes me think of that. Scary stuff.
What exactly is slander? Yeah, what is it?
Isn't it just speaking poorly on about someone? And it's usually, or I think always, untrue things.
Yeah, it's when you lie about people. But there's different kinds of things, remember? In the scriptures, it talks about backbiting and evil speaking. And sometimes evil speaking, that word evil is a very generic word. It can mean just saying bad things, just mean things. And a mean and unloving thing to do would be to talk about bad things that somebody else has done that they've already repented of. That's the most classic evil speaking or backbiting. And that is a kind of slander. It doesn't have to be that you're lying about them. It can just be that you're trying to hurt their reputation.
That makes sense.
And it can also go into the category of gossiping. So speculating and spreading rumors, that's a sin. Even talking about things that did happen and just sharing secrets about things, bringing up a conflict that was resolved a long time ago, or meddling in someone else's conflict that's ongoing, that is unloving. And you should leave it to other people to resolve a conflict. And if it comes to the church and that person ends up being brought to the whole community, to the other Christians, because it won't be resolved, and witnesses are being called, that's different. But if you're not being called as a witness, then you shouldn't meddle in it.
I guess something else that I thought about is I'm not sure where I read this, but I read it somewhere. The fathers like there is like a reward for people who no they have not uttered a slanderous claim against anyone. So I guess that's also something I was thinking about. Seems pretty can be very tricky.
Can you go into more detail on meddling? Like, is it because you said it was like getting involved in a conflict between brothers, essentially? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Let me read this to you.
Is it the one? Are you going to read the one from when this random guy in the crowd jumps up and asks, Lord, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me?
No. But that's a pretty good one. Jesus says, "Who made me an arbiter between you?" And really, he's pointing out to them, you should see me as more than this. If you're just seeing me as a man, then you really shouldn't be treating me this way. It's not honoring to treat Jesus just like an earthly king of some kind, when that's not what he's appointed for. Jesus deserves the honor and reverence that's due to God. But I was thinking of Proverbs 26:17, where he says, "Like one who takes hold of a dog's tail is him that makes himself the champion of another's cause." Or in the version I'm used to reading, it just says, "Like one who takes a dog by the ears is one who meddles in a quarrel, a dispute that's not his own." And so he gets in there and he says, "Yeah, you did this thing wrong," or "Hey, he did this thing wrong to you," or something. And encouraging or egging on a conflict, or being the champion of someone else's their own offense, like saying, "That was really wrong, you never should have done that," but it turns out the person isn't even offended, the person that you're all defending. It is good to tell others that they shouldn't act evil or say evil things, but to try to create a conflict, or to make yourself the spokesperson in a conflict between two other people is unwise. It can be reckless. You should leave it.
Well,
Most definitely.
trying to diffuse a conflict would be different. No?
Of course, that's different. But still, guys, there's a kind of person who just enjoys the conflict, or they like to get in on it. They like to be involved, and it's none of their business. And that's what I was talking about.
I just wanted to make sure. I was like, wait, have I messed up
No,
before?
you are very good at diffusing conflicts, and that is one of your strengths, Kevon. Yeah, some people are very tempted to get involved in conflicts, and they have to exercise a lot of self-control, not to be overly curious. All right, but it is 11:30, so we're going to bed, guys. It was good talking to you.
All right. You have a good night,
Oh,
Luke.
by the way, the fire. Well, Stephen, I quoted something from Acts of Thomas here. I don't know if any of this is real, so I have no idea if we're to take any of that literally. But as for whether fire is literal, there's always a corresponding spiritual reality to everything in the physical realm. Just like we have bodies in this realm, in the spiritual realm, you have something called a soul. It's your spiritual version of your body. It's the invisible, incorporeal version of you, the real part. And the spiritual part is always the more real part. And just as in this life there's a thing called water that cleanses you and washes you, there is a spiritual water, which is really the Spirit. The Spirit cleanses you of your sins, just like water cleanses your body of dirt. And if there is spiritual water, there has to be some corresponding spiritual fire. We know that the Spirit is also compared to a fire. So there's some kind of torment that the soul can endure, even if it doesn't have its body with it, that you will and can experience after death if you have any sins on you at the time of your death. And that is a purging fire. However, there is something else. There is the literal fire that you will experience when you're resurrected, when on Judgment Day, I mean, not when Jesus returns, because only the righteous will be resurrected at Jesus' return. But on Judgment Day, all the souls of the just and the unjust will be resurrected. The just who were not there at the first resurrection and who were actually being purged that whole time. And then the unjust who will no longer have a chance at salvation. They'll receive their bodies back. And the unrighteous will suffer in the body for eternity. So if the things described in this Acts of Thomas are true, they would have a chance to be hung by their tongues and their hair and things like that with their bodies. You know, guys, that there has to be a fire that is spiritual and that does burn you even apart from a body, because Jesus says that Gehenna was prepared originally for the angels, and the angels don't have bodies. Satan doesn't have a body. So there has to be a fire, a spiritual fire that burns an angel and torments them for eternity. So I'm going to bed now. It was good talking to you guys. God be with you.